This is Dubsport at Large, Clifton Joseph for Eglinton TV, downtown at the Chelsea Inn. One of the stellar writers of the 20th century, the giants of 20th century literature and organizing, Ishmael Reed is in town to talk about his latest book on Muhammad Ali, The Complete Ali. And we had a chance to speak with the dude.
I'm glad to be here.
Welcome to the town, Mr. Reed.
Yeah, well, thanks for trying to find the quietest place in this hotel.
Yeah, you have been associated with this city, well, this country, I mean, flight to Canada, to now. What's been your association with Toronto and Canada?
Well, we lived in Buffalo, you know, across the bridge, so we used to come over here on the Canadian side. When I was a kid, there was a boat that took us to Crystal Beach. I don't know if that still exists.
Yes, it's still there.
There were amusement parks there and things like that, so we had a sort of like that kind of acquaintance with Canada. And,
Yeah.
and since then, I've been over here a few times.
So was that during the time, because Buffalo almost is a part of Toronto. I mean, WBLK and Waffle Radio, Chuck E. T, David Stafford, Lee's Barbecue, Lee's Lounge, Lee's Car Wash, the Vermilion Room. That was around that time. Rick James also from Buffalo.
Yeah. Well, CBC sort of gave us an alternative idea of what was going on in the world from the corporate media in the United States. For example, they had a totally different take on the invasion of Cuba. I remember that. Listening to the CBC on the invasion of Cuba, they seemed to have more of an objective, point of view about it. So we we're in contact with the Canadian media, and since then I've been here many times, sometimes Montreal, and I've been here a few times in Toronto. My book was published in Montreal, which is part of an old tradition. 1856, a man named Benjamin Drew put together an anthology of fugitive slaves who had come to Canada from the United States. They fled the United States and, the oppression there. And they could say here what they couldn't say there. I mean, as a matter of fact, the image that they give of slavery is much more harsh, much harsher than the kind that we got in textbooks in the United States.
So Flight to Canada, go back to that one day, the genesis of that idea.
Flight to Canada was a series of my parodying genres. So the first novel was a take on a Gothic novel, and then the second novel was a Western. Of course, it was a sort of like a Africanesque or Haitian, using Haitian mythology in it and Western resources or mythologies, and the third novel was like a whodunit, but it was a whodunit about history. It wasn't. So I tried to take these different genres, and then the third novel, and then I did the Last Days of Louisiana, which was a continuation of the sort of like some of the occult. The occult images I got of my study in New Orleans, we call hoodoo or voodoo, and later I found out that this is because a number of Haitians went to New Orleans after the French were expelled from Haiti. There was a migration of Haitians to New Orleans, so and
they brought all the culture with them.
So that stuff is still there. And you find all this in the Caribbean. The Ashanti people have an influence in Obia, and so all these practices. I mean, the point is, I didn't know when I was growing up that African religion survived the slave trade, and I don't think a lot of people know that. So, I mean, that influenced that. And then Flight to Canada was take on the slave narrative, and I sort of like coined the term neo-slave narrative, like neo-hoodoo, neo-slave narrative, which has become a big academic hustle. Of course, I'm not getting any royalties, but academicians, they really pick up stuff.
They do.
So now there's a whole genre called, or a whole field of course study called neo-slave narratives.
Well, you did a fantastic job with that too, and of course, Mumbo Jumbo.
Yeah, Mumbo Jumbo was my third novel, and that was sort of like a.
That was the one that really established.
Well, it was like a fusion of different, ideas from different places. It's like a quilt. Or what I call gumbo, which has become an overused metaphor. I was the first to use that idea of the gumbo, where you take different. Well, in the Caribbean, you got.
Like that. We got a dish in Antigua called pepper pot.
Right, that's where wherever Africans go, they're very inventive.
They're forced to.
They're forced to be inventive.
Now, Chester Himes, what is he in your mind?
Chester Himes and Nicky Giovanni and Hakeem Adabudi and a whole number of Amiri Baraka base a lot of their works on the language of the streets, not from academia. So they have a good ear. Like Nicky Giovanni pretty much has captured the voice and the point of view of like proletariat black women, and Hakeem and all these people. We're part of the so-called black arts movement.
Yes.
Of course, my stuff went into a different direction, but people claim that I'm part of that. But I think the 1960s opened it up so that you didn't have to be influenced by, the Anglo-occupation language or forms. You understand? Because we're still under occupation in the United States. Opinion occupation, aesthetic occupation. Blacks don't call the they don't call the shots in terms of trends.
True.
Other people do. People with money call the shots. For example, my book is left out of discussion of the Muhammad Ali phenomenon. You understand? So when they talk about the books associated with Muhammad Ali, this is a good example of it. My books, or even the greatest, sometimes not mentioned, but books by, excuse me, white authors I prefer. And, so you get this sort of like literary and cultural apartheid still going on in the United States. So Flight to Canada not only was a departure from some of the other things I had done, but it also acquainted me with a history of my hometown that I didn't know about. I wasn't, when I went to schools and, from the, earliest grades to the university, and I wasn't aware that Buffalo, New York was sort of like a central place in black history. The Niagara movement has some connection there. Frederick Douglass, a number of the, debates about slavery, and there was the anti-slavery movement in Western New York, and this is like a big, and William Wells Brown. I brought that to the attention, I think, of the readers in Buffalo or historians of Buffalo. So now there's a big William Wells Brown resurrection all over town. They finally recognize that at least the first black American male novelist lived in Buffalo.
Wow.
And a number of other historic figures passed through Buffalo.
Well, I mentioned Himes because, his two characters, the two detectives, Gravedigger Jones and Coffin Eddie. And then when I read your character, Papa LaBa, I had to say,
you have Sherlock Holmes, who uses Western logic, and you have people like Shabazz and others who, and Chester Himes writers who have a gut feeling about things, who are intuitive. So I was trying to make that contrast. Maybe it was like overgeneralization, but it's fiction after all.
So I'm just purely about black detective. Is it Himes, you, and then Mosley?
I hadn't read much of Mosley, and because I think that's a different generation. I read Chester Himes though, and Chester Himes was very supportive of my work. Chester Himes and Johnny Williams were the first, and Langston Hughes were the first of the older generations who championed my work. Matter of fact, my first novel, The Freelance Pallbearers, was published through the efforts of Langston Hughes.
Oh, excellent. I did not know. I'm being schooled here.
He was trying to. He cultivated young writers. He didn't see himself in competition with them.
Which is not these days. Everybody seems to be in competition.
Well, I think there's probably more cooperation now than before. For example, we have established a foundation, the Before Columbus Foundation, where we welcome all different kind of writers. We have like Asian Americans, Hispanics, Italians. We have some of the leading writers from different ethnic groups, and this year's our 40th anniversary of all these different groups getting along comparatively, in a smooth manner. Among the people who are our directors is Juan Felipe Herrera, who is the current poet laureate of the United States of America. Joy Harjo, a Native American writer who just won that $100,000 prize for poetry Rudy Anaya, Chicano writer, who's got a presidential medal. So we have a sterling group, yet we get ignored by, the middle persons, the mainstream, although we do get international publicity whenever we do the American Book Awards.
Talk to me about I rolled over reading Japanese by Spring, where essentially he talks about how African American literature has been taken over by the academics and by those who are sort of writers themselves are not even talked about sometimes. How has things changed, or how has that gotten since that time?
Well, I think social media has done a lot. I think that, social media has provided us with a way to talk back. Matter of fact, we just did a book on the problem with Hollywood, which has been recycling the same images of blacks since the invention of the medium.
They never seem to stop, do they?
No, it's the same old stuff. I mean, right now, as a matter of fact, it's gotten worse. Some of the films that I critique in the New York Times and other places, I think, are worse than Birth of a Nation. But since they have blacks who are sort of like the upfront or the bogus directors or producers, they may, like I mentioned one film, Monsters Ball, which is one of the worst films. Oh
yeah, with Halle Berry.
Well, Halle Berry has an affair with the man who executed her husband.
Yep.
And a hip hopper played her husband. I mean, the hip hoppers do anything for money. They're very materialistic.
P. Diddy, Sean.
Oh, they're all materialistic. I mean, they say, well, you want these images of us and these mental images of us? Here they are.
We'll do it. We'll do it.
Although I like a lot of hip hop, but a lot of it is just corporate driven and just filthy. And well, I don't want to use a puritanical thing, but I just think that let's just say it has less depth than some of the songs that have been written in the past, or even now. So it's definitely corporate. As a matter of fact, I was on a hip hop panel because Tupac Shakur mentioned me in one of his songs.
Oh, nice.
And most of the people on the panel were like 50 years younger than me, and they gave me a hard time because what you call father wounded.
Yeah.
I tried to explain to them not only the black kids in the United States father wounded, but white kids don't have fathers in the household. 75% of the children will, at some time in their experience in the United States, will not have a father in the home. So, but they all use the stereotype to blame that all on black men, because that's how you make money. Hoisting up black men to take blame for things. As a matter of fact, there's a critic who has coined the term the black boogeyman. It's like a big like a big selling point or profit-making industry, the black boogeyman in film, literature, and other places. I try to tell them that, although they may be creating the music and maybe the critics of the music, people my age are making all the money. They're white guys, Japanese guys, making all the money because they own these record companies or, these distribution. And
well, you're not afraid to speak your mind, though. I remember reading a while ago Calvin Hurton saying that he couldn't get a book published in the 80s, 90s when there was that wave of female writers coming out of African America. And I know you intimated some of that in Reckless Eyeballing. What is it today now? Because, you see certain people out there. I was interested in going through, and I didn't see anything from you about Ta-Nehisi Coates, and I wanted to know what you thought about...
Well, I mentioned him. I mentioned that he was part of a lynch mob.
Oh, okay.
When it came to Bill Cosby. I still believe that, people should be tried in a courtroom, not on television and in the media. But I think that... I think the pattern now is that for the members of the younger generation and for, other writers is that in order to, gain prominence in the mainstream, you have to turn a black person in. You have to arrest, bring them, present them.
Take them down.
That's nothing new. Native Americans did it to each other. All kind of people did it to each other. Irish did it to each other. So it's nothing new about that. But you have to turn somebody in. So now you have the younger generation who are mostly academics, although Ta-Nehisi Coates is not an academic, who are what some people call Negro whisperers. In other words, they tell whites about black culture. You know, people who are too lackadaisical or whatever, or
The interpreters.
who lack curiosity of investigating for themselves. And you can, and I trace this to, you know, James Baldwin was one of those. I mean, James Baldwin, his role was to do the same thing. Because if I read The Fire next time, I already know it's difficult to be black. Nobody has to write a book to inform me, you know. And I'm interested in reading writers who tell me something I don't know, like John A. Williams and John O. Killens. They're not in the literary pantheon in the country like some of these other people, and they're not bestsellers because they pointed out to the hypocrisy of you know, talking about the World War II represented the greatest generation when they were segregationists. That was a segregated army, and you know, blacks were sacrificed in that army, sent to the front without ammunition sometimes. And in the Italian campaign, they were like commanded by Southern officers who knew how to handle blacks, you know, this sort of thing. That's not the word that they use. So that's a whole part of American history I didn't know anything about. So I'm interested in, you know, writers who tell me something I don't know. You know, if you tell me something that I already know.
Water is wet.
Well, I mean, yeah, right. I mean, between the world and me, I know that. I've had encounters with the police and have written about it. Although my complaints were dismissed by, you know, one of the proxies for the right wing, John McWhorter. See, the proxies used to be on the left. They used to, like Claude McKay and James Baldwin and Eldridge Cleaver. They were proxies for the left. People don't look behind the sponsorship. I mean, you know, people in New York backed Baldwin, and then when he became a little bit too militant and a little bit too difficult, you know,
they
started calling them names. And everything. He was done, so they got Cleaver. And for these people who sponsor these proxies, they're all interchangeable. So we hear this stuff about Tanisha Coates being the successor to Baldwin, which is ridiculous.
I was going to ask you about that, Toni Morrison quote.
I think coincidentally they're all in the same company. You know, I don't want to get cynical about this. Maybe it's just a marketing thing. I love Toni. I mean, I love Tar Baby. I love that book.
Yeah.
So, you know, Baldwin, by the time he was Tanisha Coates' age, he had written 2 masterpieces in play. But he found he had more freedom in Turkey than he had here.
Absolutely, which is why I left.
He was able to do things in Istanbul that he was not able to do in New York, because in New York, he embarrassed his sponsors there because they tried to close his play, Loose Mr. Charlie. He went and got some outside money, which embarrassed them. That they're supposed to have complete control.
Yeah, if they don't finance it, it's not happening.
That's right. So he got people to back his play and extend his run, including 2 Rockefeller sisters who put up $10,000 backstage on the spot to keep the play going. That embarrassed Lee Strasberg and these people who were people who were from Ukraine and came over here and went Anglo.
Became what?
Yeah, right, absolutely. You took the words right out of my mouth. So they were done with him. So he's a little, you know, you got to control these people. You know, some people can't be controlled, like Michelle Wallace and Bell Hooks. The feminists can't control them. They're unpredictable.
And then subsequently, you hear about them and then you don't.
Well, I mean, they're out.
Yes,
they're done because they challenged, you know, the corporate feminism and bourgeois feminism, and people and women who could not understand their problems, just like the people at Liberator magazine couldn't understand Claude McKay's racial problems because he thought it was all about class. This argument is still going on. Bernie Sanders represents the class argument. You know, that you change the economic system and racism disappeared. Well, it didn't happen in certain socialist countries. I mean, as a matter of fact, Ollie Harrington, the cartoonist, he said he's Germany's most racist country ever been in. It's a so-called communist country. So anyway, I think that's the way it's going on now. Is that they have what I wanted to say was at one time the left were doing these proxies.
Yes.
And then Justice Powell and William Simon, former Secretary of Treasury, and Justice Powell at the Supreme Court, they said, well, we have to have a counter argument to the left-wing control of the discourse in the United States. And academics say discourse. So they got these corporate heads a lot of money to put up a right-wing discourse, and they got their black people. So John McWhorter is a leader. And, you know, whenever I say something, he'd jump on it. Like, you know, he was an
counterpoint.
He was an obscure linguistics professor.
Of course.
And he was so good at this stuff. And put a lot of he's a Victorian style that they like, some old 19th century way of expressing oneself. And they brought him into the East and set him up there. And so I say he's like, I think it's Cole Porter's song. Every time black people say neither, he say neither. You know. So if you got Black Lives Matter, he comes on and say, well, we don't, you know.
Yeah, all lives matter.
And he you know, he said that my stuff was there are hundreds of millions of dollars in profits in saying that blacks are not experiencing what they're experiencing. You know, in my new book, I say, it's like whites get their lenses from Tiffany's, we get ours from Sears. So, you know, that's, our perspective is wrong, or, you know, it goes all the way back to the Son of Ham. I'm using the curse on Canaan in my new novel, and you look at that Talmudic curse, and it says, you know, they're not to be believed, they lie all the time. It goes, that's an ancient thing. So I talked about police brutality in a book I wrote called Another Day at the Front. And he said, well, he never experienced it, you know. But then they got him backed up with Trayvon Martin. Because he's so like a post-race figure. He went skiing and, you know, social media. And I mean, he's like a real middle-class kid. They kind of got nervous when that happened. I mean, it was just one of these ghetto kids like Freddie Martin.
Freddie Mac.
What's his name? Freddie in Baltimore.
Oh, yeah, Freddie Mac.
Yeah, but it wasn't one of these ghetto kids. It was like middle-class kids. These police, they'll kill you. You know, out in California, they beat up the black police commissioner. They didn't recognize him. One of these little towns. so I mean, you know, so that's what you're up against. But I think what happened was that Japanese by Spring was when I became a global writer.
When you became a vocal writer?
A global.
Mm-hmm.
I studied Japanese for, you know, and I'm bad at languages, but I studied Japanese, and I went up there and basically studied it and learned how to write a couple of scripts and all that. And wrote Japanese by Spring, which has gotten me two trips to China and 2 trips to Japan.
Nice.
And when I went to Tokyo, I read before the song was performed, I read the song. You know, I recited the song before it was performed, and I couldn't get through the first couple of lines without there being applause. And then I studied Yoruba and I went to Nigeria, and as a result of that visit, I published 2 anthologies from Nigerian writers and sold those to the Egyptian Center of Translation, so they're going to be translated to Arabic. And my new novel is called Conjugating Hindi. So
you're going to India now?
Well, I hope so. They had a big conference about my work in Switzerland last year, and the book is coming out from Cambridge University Press, and some of those people are from India. So I think that there's a worldwide interest in the kind of writing that we do, but I try to meet this audience halfway by studying their languages. So Conjugating Hindi, I take on Indian racism, where, you know...
That's been in the news a lot
Well,
lately.
I'll tell you what, man, I mean, you know, subcontinent Indian racism is, you know, in Africa, it's in the United States, so I take on some of the racism that you find in the Indian community in the United States.
As you mentioned Japanese by Spring, I mean, that was a time, if I recall correctly, when you had the ascendancy of cats like Houston Baker, Bill Gates, Anthony
Gates. Henry Gates.
Henry Louis Gates, Anthony Appiah, and so on. And we move all the way from there to, and feuds between those. What do you make of the feud between Michael Eric Dyson and Cornel West?
Well, it's sort of like entertainment for liberal readers in the New Republic. It's entertainment for the liberal readers of the New Republic. It's like the entertainment that Baldwin put on with Richard Wright. I have a 40-page piece coming out, a 40-page essay coming out in the James Baldwin Review. It's published in Manchester, in England, and I talk about some of the power and politics behind that. You see,
Okay, you got it. Hey, work must happen.
the problem with Baldwin is that, and the problem with a lot of black writers, intellectuals, is that they don't want to spend the rest of their lives, you know, being porters or washing dishes in some place or doing some media.
So you cash in?
If you're smart. Now, this is something a Trotsky guy told me. My Trotsky friend taught me the art of investigative reporting, named John Black, late John Black. And his father was the head of Standard Oil in Nazi Germany. And he was a communist. So, you know, the Gestapo took a hold of him. His mother he was radical. He said, when we got him, he arrived in New York, he said, in order for you to achieve as a writer, to get over as a writer, a black writer here, somebody's going to have to take you uptown. Mm-hmm. I was so naive. I thought that if I'm living downtown, somebody will put me on a subway, take me some unknown designation. It's like Joe Frazier. I was like that naive. It's like Joe Frazier when Muhammad Ali called him Uncle Tom. He thought he meant Peeping Tom. He had no idea. So, but later I became more sophisticated, having lived in New York, and found that what it meant was I had to have patronage. Mm-hmm. The Partisan Review editor, William Phillips, I clashed with him. As a matter of fact, we replaced him. We retired him. They had something called a Coordinating Council of Literary Magazines, which had millions of dollars at their disposal to give to cultural projects and magazines and little magazines and all that. Rudy Anaya, my friend, the great Chicano writer from Mexico, Albuquerque, and I and a few others, we retired them. It was a clash. And William Phillips, who the Partisan Review was his old former, left-winger who changed his politics, he's very upset with Richard Wright, according to his memoirs, because Richard Wright, at the time, was having problems with the Communist Party. Mm-hmm. And it was considered, too bourgeois, too decadent, or something like that. And they had a clash, I think, in New York City. And William Phillips became like a patriot, even though he started out left wing, he became a patriot. And they didn't like the way Wright was talking about the United States. And so they hit him in the Partisan Review. They hired Baldwin, take him down. Baldwin took down Chester Himes and The New Leader, another communist publication. And so the problem with the Partisan Review was it's financed by the CIA. Now, the Encounter magazine, Baldwin went to Paris. This is not to say he had a great talent. I call him a hustler. He was a hustler. They got upset. Some white man wrote a thing on a biography, said, I hurt his feelings, and the guy. I said he's a hustler who comes on like Joe. Well, he was that. He knew what they wanted,
And he had to establish himself amongst all these lines.
Look, he hit Du Bois and a number of. He hit Du Bois and some African intellectuals at a conference they had in Paris. I think the essay was called "Princes in Power," that he wrote. Sort of like taking them on and criticizing their speeches and things. And the Encounter magazine was also supported by the CIA. There was a woman named Mary Painter, who was his patron in Paris. She belonged to the Office of Strategic Services, which became the CIA.
CIA,
I mean, we don't know. Maybe they sponsored me someplace. I don't know. But I'm just saying that behind these so-called literary aesthetics are politics. Always behind our politics, so people get used. So that's why I said, that they come and go. The tokens come and go. Now, when Tanisha Coates offends this neocon crowd that he's hanging out with, the Atlantic Monthly. Okay, the head of the Atlantic Monthly calls himself a neocon. That's his politics.
Self-identified.
These people got us in the war. They brought him along. They sponsored him. Without the Atlantic Monthly, nobody would have heard of Tanisha Coates. For example, he's talking about reparations. Yeah. His editor just reviewed me and interviewed me. And I said, well, if you do reparations, all of it go to white folks. Because what they'll do is they'll be the ones signing the checks. And they'll get Skip Gates to trace down their black ancestors. I said, forget about reparations. Because you're not going to get none of the money. Because all these programs they designate for black people, like the FDR programs, and people thought that blacks benefited from the FDR programs or Great Society or the Small Business Administration or Social Security and all that money, Medicaid, all that goes to white folks. And I said, we have a reverse Marshall Plan in the inner cities of the United States where millions of dollars are taken out by so-called model minorities. Like in my neighborhood, the Indians run the houses of prostitution. The Mexicans and the Chinese bring in the dope. In the media, these people are shown as model minorities, but they're the ones taking hundreds of millions of money out of our neighborhood. Plus, this the scam that Clinton put on us. leading to promiscuity of the banks where, they issue subprime loans to blacks. Some of the loan officers called them mud people and all sort of kind of crazy stuff.
Yep.
It was racist. So, the whole thing about the United States is that it was created to build the assets of white men and to diminish the assets of blacks. That still goes on.
And it's still doing.
You don't hear these professors and sociologists and preachers that they hire to talk on TV even talk about economics. But I said this is a Marshall Plan in reverse. Because you give the underground economy, you get the police taking all this money out through seizing the assets of drug dealers and they take the money and they take their cars. And as a matter of fact, one of my brothers is a lawyer named Barry Lenore. Kip Lenore, the attorney, lives in New York City. He says when blacks started getting assets from drug deals, that's when they started seizing them.
Yeah, you can't get too big.
So the idea is to keep the assets of blacks down. They never mention this stuff. They're always talking about, the government should give us handouts when all those handouts go to whites. They don't go to blacks. So that's what I said about reparations. Whites will get all the money. I was thinking about writing the answer to George Scala's Black No More,
Black No
White
More.
No More. Because if there's a big payroll involved, people will get it. What they'll probably do is have the money distributed in neighborhoods that blacks can't go into.
See.
Nouveau blacks will get all the money.
Or some new right wing.
Absolutely. I mean, Melissa Harris Perry, this academic, said that, race is no longer a biological determinant, and blacks have to get over this. That's about that woman in Washington, D.C.
Who is it?
So it's a mess. I mean, it's a mess. But I think social media and our building our own foundations, and, people like Haki Madhubuti having his press, my press. I mean, Madhubuti published that book, Black Hollywood Unchanged.
Sure.
No big publisher would have published that. I think it's changing, just like you got that camera there, man.
Yeah.
That was unheard of when we did our film in 1981. We spent all this money on making it, which is classic. They revived it. It was at Lincoln Center and the American Film Institute and UCLA. It was all our money and Bill Gunn, who was too difficult for Hollywood, directed it.
Big.
And Berta Mae Grosvenor, it was too dark for Hollywood. She was the leading
right in there.
woman. So we can do it instead of relying on these other institutions. But what I'm interested in now is becoming a global writer, so that my fate is to live from the hands of these racist critics and middle persons in the United States.
Because I heard something from Dick Gregory, and turns out weeks after I saw that on YouTube, Sam Greenlee died. But here's what Dick Gregory said, that the CIA came to him with a manuscript, and they wanted to put his name on it. They met him after a show. And he said that manuscript turned out to be the spook who sat by the door. Now, I shook my head a little bit, but then, and you talked about it the other day too, recently, that the FBI, that book that shows the FBI and the CIA, FBI's, yes.
There's another book that talks about the investigation of writers in the 30s that I just got.
Yes.
I haven't read it yet, but
I certainly could understand and I knew about the 30s, because that time writers were communists, they're socialists, they were pretty strident and pretty clear with their philosophies.
My name is on the list. I mean, my name is misspelled.
So some people say it's just literature, it's just art, but the danger of art, that you have government officials and government agencies.
It's not just literature. They don't say that about Django Unchained. I mean, people tell me Django Unchained is just entertainment, get over it, move on. It's Library of Congress honored Django Unchained and some historical event that they had. It's being taught in universities. It's become like accepted narrative of black history, where you have all these blacks assembles who are passive, sitting around waiting for a superhero who's guided by a German. The German in the film show says he's an extension of me. I mean, people have missed apparently those lines.
It's interesting that there's a German,
But what they did was they tacked on a love story. I mean, some of the people in my anthology, at least they got a love story. But it's like rotten candy. You can have like a Belgian chocolate that's got worms inside. That's the love story was just to fake people out. And this big old sugar rush at the end, where they kill all the white folks. As a matter of fact, they were killing white women. And I was in the theater, white women in front of me started applauding. It's just what's his name called torture porn. So they have blacks in Hollywood who are controlled by producers and others. Matter of fact, I was talking about Monsters Ball. Lee Daniels said he directed it, turned on, white guy directed it. They put him up front. Precious, the worst film ever made by black life. The worst film ever made about black life.
And
Precious.
he's very proud of it.
Well,
So he says.
Nothing to be proud of there. Matter of fact, I wrote about it in the New York Times and talked about the history of that kind of film. And Sapphire, the woman who wrote the book, got very upset and said that we should have more films about black rapists. God, don't they get enough of it? We get them on TV all day. That's the only reason.
Going way back.
That's very little. That's probably the most frequent and typical image of black men on TV and in the media is that of the rapist because it gets everybody excited. I don't know. I'm not a psychologist, but there must be some reason for that. But Precious was a cynical marketing plan that I followed. The marketing plan. Well, they said we can't sell this to black people. They're going to get very offended. So we couldn't sell the great debaters. I mean, they underplayed the role of Melvin Tolson. That's who Denzel Washington was portrayed, the great poet. Melvin Tolson, the great modernist.
Harlem Gallery.
Supposed to be better than Eliot, some people say, the great, and at least more learned. And we can't sell that. Nobody wants to see that. And then Bridge of St. Anna. That's a problem. We can't sell that because it shows heroic. The Great Debater shows intellectual, cerebral blacks. They don't like that. And heroic blacks in Bridge of St. Anna. We can't show that. So, but we can sell this. They said, well, how do we sell it? We bring in black producers. So when Oprah came in, that's when the distributor said, okay, we're going to go with this.
We can work with this. We can work with this now.
And then you get a whole lot of black people back in that film. It was trash. It was awful. So the Jewish magazine called The Tablet asked me to comment on Alice Walker, who's doing an embargo on Israel.
Yeah.
Her book sold there. I said, blame yourself. You're the one that made this woman, number one. And number two, I want to see Steven Spielberg make a movie about the oppression of Jewish women in the United States and Israel. I've been to Israel 3 times. The first time I went there, the feminists picketed the Knesset. The highest rate incidents in the West of husbands killing their wives. I say, make a film about that. So then I read the tablet. They don't think you read this stuff. I read the tablet, and it's Jewish intellectual women who are talking about how Jewish producers don't give them roles. They give Gentiles roles that belong to them. They talked about Woody Allen. He had Muriel Hemingway play a role that was supposed to be played by a Jewish woman. I said, now if you did do a color purple, who would play Celie? Nicole Kidman? I said, oh, one of these blonde rhyme maidens in Woody Allen movies. And, oh man, they said, oh, this is great, we love this. Finally, they sent me a note saying, the men liked the piece, but the women didn't want it. I said, well, why would they critique the patriarchs in their background when they can dump on Moles? So what you have, and this is my only complaint, I'm for everything on the women's agenda, the feminist agenda, the old feminist agenda. Harry Fraud of Tikkun magazine said it was co-opted by Gloria Steinem and all of them. It's corporate feminism. So the deal that they made was, if you allow us to advance in our careers, we take the heat off and you can put it on Moles, because Moles can't, he's not giving us the payroll. So black men became the scapegoat. The only problem I have with it is that women from all different groups are using the black feminist movement to sort of like signify on the behavior of men in their ethnic groups. Do you understand? But they can't mention them, so they aim all the fire at Moles. For example, the 2 subcontinent Indian women who did a film about Alice Walker. I'm the heavy in it. They had me in there like being the villain, like in the melodramas. A lot of this feminist literature reads like melodramas. You get saintly women surrounded by brutish men, like the old style of movies, where you had the guy with the black people, like
the music to go with it too.
With the woman lying on the tracks. I said, well, goddamn, I'm better than Tolstoy. I mean, Anna Karenina, she commits adultery, and in the last scene, she's run over by a train, as punishment, right?
Yeah.
So you have women from all different ethnic groups piling on, but they have to keep the secrets of the communities. Hi. You have to keep the secrets of the community. So, for example, there was a very smart Egyptian American student who wrote this book that my agent came out. They loved it. She was going to be big. She withdrew the book because she said she didn't want to embarrass her community. But this tales of her father just goes crazy. Like there's so many ethnic groups in the United States. I don't know a black guy who kills somebody for honor killings and all this kind of stuff happens, and those things still go on. So what happened is that black men have become like the what do you call the piñata for the feminist movement.
The international scapegoat.
That's right, because these women want to keep the secrets
of their own communities.
They're scared. So you got these two Pakistani or Indian women. Situation among Indian women is a mess, man. Gang rapes.
Gang rapes on the bus in public.
Millions of children on the street in prostitution. I mean, just it's a mess, So, but they use us, jump on us. That was my critique. I paid for it. They put me out of business with reckless eyeballing, which was a tongue-in-cheek satire about some of their fantastic, conclusions about like Emmett Till was as guilty as his murderers. I mean, that's where I took off with that, and then led to some of the other contradictions. Now they are fading because their contradictions are obvious to everybody. They jumped on Clarence Thomas, who's not a fan of his, and let Clinton slide. Or they jump on Cosby and let maybe
Jim Lampley.
Not Jim Lampley. I put that in my book because he jumped on Floyd Mayweather.
Yeah, and he's
up there beating up
his Miss California.
And what's that guy's McEnroe, the tennis player?
Yeah,
Tatum O'Neal. He was mad at her. He said he used to beat the crap out of her, and he's got a commercial. So
he's resurrected. But when you were growing up, what was your impression of Cassius Clay? He was a hero. He was a total hero then.
Idolized him, and even for looked over the fact that he turned his back on Malcolm X, who was a friend of mine actually, and some of the other stuff that went on. Said that interracial couple ought to be murdered. He had one on the side. When you hear these guys, I can mention one of them who's a big pundit and all that, Reverend so and so. They're all fanatical about this stuff. I find that they probably.
But they believe in integration between the sheets.
That's right. Well, they might have one or two on the side, when they get really all worked up about it. But we just even when Doug Jones beat him, I think Doug Jones beat him in the garden. I mean, I'm thinking Amiri and some of the other people, but he was telegenic. I don't know. I just had divided feelings about it.
Well, go back to rewind to the beginning though, because he was larger than life and was a boxer. So talk about that early period from Cassius to Ali.
I liked him in the ring. He's fast. He's fast and entertaining. Like artistic. He's artistic. It's like Curry. You have to start talking about art. You have to go beyond athletics to talk about art with those guys. Ali, but then he got into trouble and. All the women in the bad company. Men Stewart broke it all down to me. Stopped training. Underestimated people like Leon Spinks. And listened to these people in his camp who said he could go on and fight Larry Holmes. He never should have fought Larry Holmes. As a matter of fact, I wrote a sports commentary about the second Spinks Ali fight. I went to New Orleans, sponsored by the Village Voice, and I predicted in that piece that he would lose to Larry Holmes. Because Larry Holmes had a left as good as his. That left jab Larry Holmes had, man. And then
you're going to pay for that. You're going to pay the next morning.
And Sonny Liston had a shoulder injury. That actually happened. I just finished a piece on Sonny Liston, stuff I didn't know. Is that he was in line to get another shot at the heavyweight championship. He beat it, man. He was knocking out. He went to Sweden, man. He was knocking out everybody. Second round, fifth round. Then he came back home, started knocking out everybody again. And then then the vacancy, the competition was Jimmy Young and Joe Frazier, but they wouldn't let him have a shot. He was in line because he would have beat both of them.
Wow.
You know what I mean?
And he was older cat.
He was older, but the power, power. So I mean, that's my thing about him. In 1978, I was still in awe of Muhammad Ali. As a matter of fact, he was coming out of a room with Veronica, and I was standing. I said, "The greatest man in the world." And but then I started this book in 2003.
Why? Why?
Well, they approached me. Shea Earhart, who was Jacqueline Kennedy's editor, was at Crown Publishers. and she approached me about writing a book. And I said, well,
Did you jump right away?
Yeah, absolutely. And I thought I was going to write another one of these heroic, idolizing books like
the great,
the Thomas Hauser's book. Thanks to Canada, I'm number 4 up here.
Congratulations.
I'm number 4, man. I'm a bestseller up here, but not in the United States, because you have to lop off that Nation of Islam part. You gotta. He was repackaged when he did the Olympics, so you have to lop that off in order to get over down there. You can't mention that.
You'd have to write a different book?
Absolutely.
So as you started doing more research then, is that when you started?
I found all
So
those
what were
stuff.
some of the things that you said, well, I got to put this in the book, and I know it's going to piss off some people, but it's my job to do what I do.
Well, the most explosive thing I found was what happened in Cherry Hill. Cherry Hill, New Jersey.
Cherry Hill, New Jersey.
Yeah, that he was in cahoots with a gangster named Major Coxon, who was called the king of East Coast heroin. And although they said that he really suffered those 3 years, he was living in luxury. Major Coxon, according to Khalila Ali, his second wife, whom I interviewed, and he humiliated her. He humiliated her. She said that Major Coxon lent them the mansion. Now, the folklore.
You lend somebody a mansion?
Well, and she said, we'll pay you back when he returns to boxing, right? So he fronted for. He had a club, a luxurious club that Ali would come to, and so Ali was like fronting. The authorities were reluctant to investigate what was going on because Ali was actually using it. They were using his image. You understand what I mean? And so this guy was in hoc with or in cahoots with the organized crime, and they had sent a shipment from New Jersey to Philadelphia, and a couple wannabes hijacked the shipping. Major Coxon was supposed to take care of them. He farmed out the job to somebody else, and they bungled it. So he got hit. They came into his home, tried to kill everybody. They murdered him and injured children. It was a mess. And Khalila told me that she predicted something like that would happen. She had a dream predicting that something like that would happen. He was he ran for mayor of Camden. He's a colorful guy. For example, in Jet magazine, if you go there, you'll find him when the tax people seize his assets and cars and everything. He had a tandem bicycle where his chauffeur was riding in front. So he's a very colorful, entertaining person. He had all these beautiful cars and all this stuff. His sportsman nightclub and everything. So after that happened, Ali said that he knew what was going on. And they had a temple in a mosque in Philadelphia.
A mosque in Philadelphia.
Yeah. Well, people say that people were shocked. The people and the crime people were shocked. The authorities were shocked because it was organized. Black people had.
Just a moment, dear. Just let this conversation die down a bit. Well, she's getting.
Colorful background.
Yeah. Actually, let's go. It's happening. Okay. So you you're saying that they have a mobster mosque?
Yeah, where
Philadelphia?
yeah, it was all these criminals ran it. I think they were using Nation of Islam as a front. And when Wallace took over, he tried to clean all that up. But I mean, you had criminals, you had scientists, you had mathematicians, you had all kind of different people in that group. So Jeremiah Shabazz, according to some of the people I talked to in Philadelphia, including the policeman who wrote Blood Brothers, there's a book called Blood Brothers, all about this crime syndicate, including this guy, said that Jeremiah Shabazz, according to street knowledge, ordered the hit on the Hanafi Muslims in Washington, D.C. You know, you know about that. Well, the Hanafis thought that Elijah Muhammad was a charlatan, that they were the Orthodox
Yes.
Muslims, and they resented the fact that Gaddafi gave the people of Chicago money and didn't give him, or something like that. There's all kind of explanations for this. So they went in there and killed these people, drowned the kids, and it's like a massacre. What does Ali do? He hires Jeremiah Shabazz
As his bodyguard.
And I'm thinking that if it ever,
There's no way he didn't know.
I don't know, but if it ever comes out that he knew, that's the end of the Ali Center, the statues and everything. But nobody, Sean Griffin, the ex-detective who's a criminologist now, he said nobody ever looked at, he said these questions should have been asked in the 70s. But, you know, that's one of the many criminal associations he made. Another thing that got me a little upset was the fact that he might have knocked Khalila Ali unconscious in Zaire.
Wow.
We have witnesses.
Wow. That's
Quincy
outrageous.
Troop, and Quincy Troop still insists upon that story. That he and Archie Moore and a doctor were at the pool. Quincy Troop was sent to cover the fight in Zaire. And when he found out that he was being used, that they were just use his notes and put a white author's name on it. You know how we are natural resources.
Yeah.
I don't know if you read New York Times this week and it said Jack Daniels' secret ingredient formula
Was a slave.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, that happened to me. They take our patents. You know, Dr. O took my book and made ragtime out of it. Hollywood took Yellowback and made Blazing Saddles. So we're patents. I mean, we are deprived of our patents.
See.
So he said that Khalila shows up in Zaire. They hear a lot of arguments and screaming and yelling, and all of a sudden.
Oh yeah, because there was that thing where she flew in because he was cavorting too much.
Veronica. Now she says Veronica was there for George Foreman. I mean, Khalila's. But anyway, they come down and get the doctor, and he said, you know, doctor goes up and says, you know, he knocked her out, and he says if you see her tomorrow, she's going to have sunglasses. The next day she had sunglasses on. Now he also did that with the first wife, Sonia, and that's when he and Sugar Ray Robinson split. That was the beginning of the split, because he was apparently, you know, dealing with her in the bathroom. Sugar Ray Robinson tries to intervene, and he says, "I'll come out there and whip your lightweight ass." That's Sugar Ray Robinson is his mentor. I mean, that's where he gets his style from, obviously. His style, dancing away and all this sort of kind of stuff. And, you know, I ask trainers about boxing. I ask Emmanuel Stewart about boxing. So, so that happened too. Sugar Ray Robinson couldn't deal with this business of his being a Muslim. I interviewed his son, Sugar Ray Robinson Jr. He said that, you know, Sugar Ray Robinson's mom, apple pie and all this, you know. But he did say that when he saw, Sugar Ray Robinson said when he saw Ali in Louisville, I think it was, that he felt that Ali was being intimidated by the Muslims. That, you know, I mean, that he had no choice but to say he was not going to go to Vietnam because that was the policy.
And the food of Islam can be
right.
persuasive.
Well, I mean, you know what happened up here in Toronto. You know, when they threatened, when the organized crime threatened Ali, you know, said he's going to end up in the bottom of Lake Michigan. The guy, Glickman, the guy who delivered the message, according to George Cavallo, ended up in the insane asylum after they visited him. First the hospital, then the asylum, never recovered.
He got...
Well, I mean, that, you know, look, organized crime has stifled, that's one of the institutions in this country that has stifled the ability for blacks to gain assets in music and all kinds of other ways, you know. And I was just told, as a matter of fact, that organized crime tried to prevent the trucks, the Nation of Islam trucks from moving, right? And one of them, the guy said that Elijah Muhammad summoned Sam Giancana to the mansion.
In Chicago.
Yeah, and introduced him to his general.
And
that was the end of that.
The trucks kept on
but
running.
I mean, they were, I mean, whatever you want to say about them, organized crime still stifles black progress in the music industry and all kinds of other areas. You know?
what of Ali's relationship with Frazier? It was in that book, The Ghosts of Manila, that I found out for the first time that Frazier had been paying Ali, subsidizing Ali during those lean years when the government was on his case.
He was responsible for, he was one of those responsible for Ali's comeback, and was treated very badly by Ali. Now see, I talk about some of Ali's taunts of his opponents.
Yes.
Bordered on racism. You know, because I said, well, you know, is he referring to, when he says he's pretty, is he referring to his European heritage? And some of these writers have said that he's pretty because of his European heritage. You know?
Yeah.
And he did say, you know, that African women were ugly. Remember he said that? He said that. Ali said that he's glad that his grandfather got on the boat. And he said that he was going to take all the source writers who had written bad copy about him and take them to Zaire and put them in a cauldron. And Mobutu's soldiers said, we do not, you know, Mr. Ali, we do not eat people over here, you know. I mean, I told you Zora Neale Hurston wrote a play about black Africans as cannibals. You know, he was a young man. He was a young person. You know,
Brash, cocky.
Yeah. I think after, you know, he followed Wallace, there seemed to be some maturity entering his life. And, you know, as it progressed, he became a wise person, I believe. I think he became a wise man. But at that early period, the period that they liked, you know, just like they like Malcolm X and the
fiery,
the pimp part, they love all that.
Detroit
stuff.
Red.
Yeah, Detroit Red, when he's all colorful and, you know, denouncing. And another point I found out is that he was not as hard on right boxers as he was on black boxers, you know, calling Joe Frazier these names and calling, you know, Sonny Liston all these different names. So, because George Carol Oates, they dropped my piece and put her piece in there.
Well,
my piece was in New York, they put her piece in there. And she said that he really stood up to, you know, the white man. But the white people are the ones who are paying the tickets to come to this. So, in the way he pampered them, you know, he's really light on them.
Gotta be focused on business.
Hard on black folks. And sort of like, you know, in a couple of instances, you know, approved of some of the fruit, you know, punishing people in a physical way.
And of course, the sad decline in skills and in
training. Yeah, it sounds like seems that he was bored with boxing after a while. You know, 3 years off didn't help. As a matter of fact, he lost his speed.
Developed some bad habits?
Oh yeah, bad habits. You know, a lot of women. You know, this crowd that he was hanging out with was corrupt. I think Herbert Muhammad is not given the respect that he's due, because everybody I talked to said that Herbert Muhammad tried to manage this whole thing. It was hard to manage him.
Of course, I can imagine.
So, you know, the guy you know, he just, it's a sad story. I don't see it as a triumph. I mean, in that Olympic lighting of the torture, that was all arranged by NBC. They made $480 million on that Olympics, and you know, that was all coordinated, that they would have him there for the big moment, because somebody else is supposed to light the Olympic torture. The Olympic torch, and he lit it, which was a commercial moment. And that's when he became a commodity.
Yeah, because and I remember at the time George Frazier, I thought, was very indelicate when he said that the dude can't even hold the thing, because Ali's hands were shaking, and you could see the early effects.
Yeah, that's what. Well, the black people are usually left out of these books. Sam Greenlee included, said that they you know, he's no longer the loud, boastful, you know, Louisville lip, but had really been silenced.
See,
that's why all his admiration. Mainstream admiration.
And it's so ironic that he couldn't speak for all those years.
Well, she speaks for him. But I tell you, you know, people are down on her. The people I talk to, they're down on her. But
well, some things, I mean, like
I say that he outlived a lot of the people who were concerned about his health.
Because
including Joe Frazier, who mocked his health.
see, yeah, 30-something years. I mean, it's hard to believe it's so long he's been fighting that.
And when she met him, when she decided to rescue him, he was mumbling he's broke and in bad health because he fought the last 2 fights with brain damage, according to Angelo Dundee, who's an FBI informant, incidentally. They leave that out of these other books. He's like the saint, the white male savior.
Yep, who came in and
preventing him from getting damaged and instructing him between the rounds. And, you know, this guy was the FBI informant for the, on the Nation of Islam. According to Gawker, they published that. I got that in my book.
Well, look, we're running out of time here, but tell me about your latest projects now. What's happening now?
I'm writing 2 novels. I'm working on 2 novels, and I have a concept for a play I'm trying to get a grant to do about Frederick Douglass in Rochester in Canada, when Buchanan, on the orders of this governor of South Carolina, issued a warrant for his arrest after John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry. They implicated Frederick Douglass, and he had to escape the United States, come to Canada. So I'm working on something, and the rivalry between him and William Wells Brown. Because Douglass was their token, but when he went independent, they brought in William Wells Brown, so there was a tokens,
Yeah, dilute.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I'm working on that, and still working with David Murray and some other composers. He just did a CD just came out where he did my a song I wrote called Red Summer 2015 about all the murders and these different incidents, Black Lives Matter, all that, and still studying jazz, still playing the piano, and just got my hands full.
How have you maintained all of these years being excluded? Your body of work is magnificent. It's huge, humongous. And how do you maintain? Because I look forward to your pieces in Counterpunch, for instance, where you're always right there on point talking about what it is that you're doing. And I say, man, Ishmael is doing all this shit I didn't realize. How do you maintain yourself after all of this thieving, the keeping you down, the
I get excluded.
Marginalizing?
I'll tell you what. I got a following among blacks and whites. There are blacks and whites who always support me. Now, James Baldwin complained about the reviews that he got for Bluesmith Charlie. Complained about them. I didn't get a single mainstream review for my book, my play, The Final Version, which is a challenging play for actors. It's at the New York Poets Cafe. Not a single review. But it was a success because of word of mouth, because black media, and that got it over. And the same thing with the Muhammad Ali book. I got black media, I got Muslim media in the United States, and that's sort of like has sustained it, So it's a big world. Now, I wrote a novel called Juice. I don't know if you read that.
No, I haven't.
It has the OJ trial as a background, and they hated the book here. As a matter of fact, one of Skip Gates' employees put it down in syndicated column. This guy was described to me by Joel Dreyfus as a white boy thinks he knows about hip hop, or something like that. But I got a great review in China. They didn't do my play here, Mother Hubbard. PBS was supposed to do it. They chickened out. It was done last year in China. My play.
Of all places,
Play of mine was done in Baden-Baden in Germany. So, and then I just got this prize in Italy. A few weeks ago, I got the Albert DeVito Award in Venice. They brought us over there and everything. I was on Rome radio for a few hours.
So you've gone internationally.
Absolutely.
If they block you here, you've gone totally international.
Absolutely. And I got that way, Japanese by Spring was the beginning. They didn't have a clue here, but they don't have names. So.
But you're a pretty mischievous guy. Let me ask you though, what was the meat behind the beef between you and Baraka?
There was no beef.
There's no beef.
Baraka was in many ways a hypocrite. But I'll just leave it there. I wrote a piece in the Transition. That magazine comes out of Harvard.
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah, nice magazine.
So there was really no beef. As a matter of fact, we're in correspondence until November of his death.
Wow.
And we were very friendly. I published 2 of his books. I published Sydney Poet Heroical and
Yes, you did.
the cartoon book. So there was. In the beginning, I think there were some tensions when he was in his Black nationalist period, which wasn't really Black nationalist. If you know some of the other stuff.
Where he was hooked up with Karenga.
Well, I knew a lot of stuff that was going on in New York. That's not really Black nationalism, but that was the veneer they put on it. And so there were tensions. But then in 1974, he changed. People remember him in that the dashiki and everything.
See, yeah.
He changed. 1974, he became communist. Gave all that up and denounced Black nationalism.
Yep, he did.
So
Because I've always considered both of you to be exceptionally similar in terms of playwrights, poets, interface with the musicians, novelists, organizers, wide-ranging cats, you know what I mean? And they say sometimes that you have to be focused on one thing, but you certainly haven't done that.
Well, I think that he got upset when I was a very young person and criticized his poetry. And he never got over that. Matter of fact, but his poetry changed. When he came in contact with Askia Torre, who's a true philosopher with Larry Neal of the Black Arts Movement, when he came in contact with Askia, his poetry changed. Just the difference. Look at Dead Lecturer, all this downtown aesthetic, avant-garde stuff, and then look at the Black Power poems. They're quite different. So, as a matter of fact, he denounced the early poetry. I was talking about the early poetry, Dead Lecturer, which was influenced by those people downtown. So he never got over that. But I found the power that he had because I told him that in the fire spot, and they only told me not to come out there, come in the fire spot again. I got barred from it. So he had a lot of power.
Ooh, give me that story.
I was standing at the bar with Calvin Herndon and Amiri. I said, your poetry is weak. And boy, he walked out. And the owner told me not to come in the fire spot again. Because I think Amiri was doing, jazz criticism with them,
yes,
helping them with their audience and their sales. But I think that was a turning point in the 70s. This guy, Joel Wexman, this is the guy that ran a magazine called African American Review, didn't know what the word iced meant.
Ice.
Yeah, he said that me and Steve Cannon, my partner, should be iced for what we said about Malcolm X. And the only thing I said about Malcolm was, you can't criticize him because he's a holiday now. He's becoming an icon. You can't criticize him. He said we should be iced. So I wrote it. I said, man, why'd you put that in there? He said, well, I thought iced meant to reprimand severely. Running an African American review.
You're joking.
Yeah, with these black scholars on the as contributing editors, they could have their own magazine. I got my own magazine. Me and my daughter put out a magazine. This magazine's 26 years old this year. Conk, you can get it online.
Yeah, I've read
So there's no excuse for not people running to some guy, some intermediary, to publish, stuff about black culture.
So we've got so many black millionaires, so many black politicians, so many blacks who are represented since the segregation. Naively, I'll ask you, how come things haven't changed when there's so much more access, so much more independently wealthy?
Well, I think I did a book on, I did an essay for a magazine, Green Magazine, I think it was called, on black philanthropy. They give a lot. I think black philanthropists give probably more than members of other ethnic groups.
Well, LeBron just paying for, a couple of thousand.
Well, some people, Bill Cosby helped me finance my play, but, he's giving a lot of money, and these people are, even though he's set foot in the courtroom, they're giving it back. Spelman gave to him, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, they did.
Are you going to bet the backgrounds of all the people who give money to who endow universities,
then
inside traders?
Monies wouldn't be spent.
That's ridiculous. It's stupid. But I'm in contact with him. I noticed, for example, that the other main case, this girl had said that he raped her at a Playboy Mansion. She was crazy. They threw it out. She was nuts.
Hello?
And she said she had a cooperating witness. This woman said she never heard of her. So it was a nutcase. But you don't see the media talking about it.
Yeah, no.
Because they see ratings that like they get for OJ forever. Like I was on that, I was interviewed by the OJ thing, which had 35 million. OJ Made in America. This is Ezra Edelman, his mother's in the Children's Defense Fund. He came to my house, interviewed me about OJ, and didn't include my interview in me. They had my name, they give me a credit.
Yeah, right.
It was a racist program. It was racist.
It's gotten a lot of play.
But it was racist.
It's gotten a
See,
lot
because
of
they're
play.
taking everything from Jeffrey Toobin, who wrote a book called Run of His Life about
Yeah,
OJ.
he used to be on CNN, did that?
He's still on
the same dude?
CNN. He said black people are intellectually inferior. He said they came to that conclusion because they believe in conspiracy theories and they're not capable of rational thought. I thought it was racist. And then he said they shouldn't be patted on the head. Here's a guy who's Harvard married, and belongs to the upper classes. Here's a guy who says that the idea of police prosecutorial misconduct is ridiculous. And I got statistics on prosecutorial conduct goes on all over, especially the blacks and Latinos. So they kept mine out. They had Walter Mosley was in there, but he hasn't studied the case. So my point of view was that there's still the question of the police planted evidence. I don't care what you think about whether he's innocent or not. The police planted evidence.
Yeah.
And that's why the blacks voted for acquittal. They didn't vote according to some kind of race card. And I said, well, for example, the three big scientists involved in the case, three forensics experts, Cyril Wedge, Michael Bodden, who's such an expert, he had a show called Autopsy, and Henry Lee, raised questions about the police evidence. They're not playing a race card. Two of them are white and one's Chinese. So there's still questions about that case that the media glossed over in order to get a audience. Then they had the prosecutors. The one guy got sick. I forgot his name, Hedgeman or whatever. Remember, he got sick in the first few days of the trial. And Marshall Clark, they let them in that film. They let them yammer on and on and on about hypotheticals that were refuted in the court. So they tried the thing over again, the television trial. They don't get you on in the courtroom; they get you on TV.
See.
So
Change the narrative.
I'm surprised that there was not like an uprising among intellectuals in this country about what television is doing to the court system and how they're actually creating presidential candidates. Dan Rather said yesterday that the media and Trump are business partners. He brings them ratings. He sells his products.
Of course.
Oh man, that's ridiculous. So they have my name on there.
But not
it was
you.
a racist project. And all of the series that you see on OJ that are being revived are being presented. They take Jeffrey Toobin's The Run of His Life. He said, for example, the gloves fit. He wasn't there. Linda Deutsch of Associated Press saw the glove demonstration and said the gloves didn't fit. She was there. He wasn't there. He didn't witness the demonstration. And I taped the whole thing. I followed that trial, wrote a big book, I followed that trial. When the gloves are brought to the table, OJ says they look too small. These are killer's gloves.
See.
So I mean, the reason that they have to keep rehashing is that there's still questions about that case. Now, the whites in this country might believe it's guilty, a growing number of blacks, but there are millions of people who still, and if you look at some of the blogs that follow these things, they say, well, I don't believe this, there are millions of people who still believe that he got that the trial was unjust. They took it to Santa Monica so they can get a white jury. They challenged the Petroselli, what is this guy's, Petroselli? I think that's his name. Challenged the black jurors, Goldman, the old man, said, it was a proper jury, It was Santa Monica jury, not the downtown jury. And then they trapped him in Las Vegas. And what they left out about that Las Vegas thing was the guy that had trapped him informed the FBI that this sting was going to happen. They left that out. So it's irresponsible journalism. It's like, and even shoddy entertainment. And I wish they'd take my name off the thing.
Damn. Finally, how ironic is it then that we're winding down 2 terms, 8 years of a black president, yet racism, extrajudicial killings of black people by police, of course, more rampant racism in the media, in politics, and just all over the place, where it seems as if a black president means that you can come out of the hiding when you would have thought it would have been different.
They're in a panic all over the West. They're in a panic. They're in a panic all over the West. That's what happened in England. There's such fanatical white racism that they jeopardize their portfolios. This happened when Cruz shut down the government, and Standard & Poor's gave the United States a lower rating. These people lost millions of dollars in their portfolios because, and the same thing is happening in England. $100 billion lost in the United States because the Tea Party in Britain, the Tea Party thinking, will go to any ends to support white racism, and so all of us pay a white supremacy tax. We all pay a white supremacy tax.
But it's so illogical.
We have to pay for these stupid wars they get in because they feel they're superior to people. Go over different countries, call people gooks and everything, call them animals. So we have to pay for that. The Civil War, we're still paying for that, where they show that they're so suicidal about white supremacy that 600,000 people get killed on the battlefield and so sacrifice themselves for white supremacy. So there's a white supremacy tax that all of us pay. That's another way they relieve us of our assets. Now, you poll black people, they say, "Oh no, we're not doing no bet now." Right? That's what Elijah Muhammad said. We're not going to fight our Asiatic brothers. It's ridiculous.
Go do your own fighting.
So when that thing happened with Cruz, and they shut down the government, and Standard & Poor's gave a low rate, I said, these Tea Party people, these people are so fanatical about this thing that they jeopardize their IRAs. They jeopardize their savings to make that, to go along with this. So I think white supremacy probably is more dangerous than Ebola and the flu that killed all these people. No, really. In terms of lives, we lost millions. People all around the world have lost millions of lives. They went into Iraq. That was, they don't know anything about Islam. They think there's a bunch of ragheads or whatever, or towel heads or whatever. And hundreds of thousands of people were killed over there. So I don't know how this is going to end, but whatever, Michael Eric Dyson always put people on the fringes. And you got 87% of black people supporting Barack Obama. 87%. You got these people on the fringes. Cornel West, Michael Eric Dyson get all this space in the media to criticize it. They've never administered anything. They're professors. I don't think they've ever been deans where they have to really run something. Yeah, you can get in the classroom, get on television, say all kinds of things.
Yeah.
But, you have Barack Obama, who's the head of one of the biggest organizations, the executive department of the United States. That's one of the biggest organizations in history. He has to run. These guys never run anything. They can get on, some of them, I don't mean these two, they get up on television and string a bunch of adjectives, all of which mean the same thing. Everything they say can be edited down to 100 words. But it's a show. So I said, having these guys.
And those two dudes especially love the spotlight.
Oh, well, this shows you how silly the white left is. They're going to run him in the primary against Cornel West. They're going to run him in the primary against Barack Obama. That shows you where their head is at. So it's amazing that you've got 87% behind this man, and then you got people. It's like taking Lyndon LaRouche and having him speak for white folks. Somebody way out in the fringes.
If I was to pull a phrase that you yourself has used as a title of one of your book to describe you, would you agree that writing is fighting?
Well, I think this something I learned in high school, that I could defend myself and against my adversaries by being able to write. And and I think it's the cheapest form of talk back, or as in the Caribbean they call it fight back. You listen to Mighty Sparrow, fight back stuff, serious comedy. It's one of the things that we have available to us. But with technological innovations like what you have here, more players are going to enter the field. More people, more points of view are going to be represented. And this is and YouTube is getting ready to. I mean, people put stuff on YouTube and everything. I mean, I think Hollywood is such bad shape that in Oakland, you can pay $5 to stay all day in a movie. For cash. Because they got a lot of alternatives.
Can I get you to say?